Basically, make merry is what it sounds like. But what holy day is he talking about? I feel like when you don't know about religion, things just get more and more confusing when you try to answer these questions. Okay, so the time period that he's talking about is the English Reformation. Henry VIII was named Defender of the Faith, and that's a phrase that has been used as part of the full style of many English and later British monarchs since the early 16th century for his opposition to Luther's Reformation. English history is really interesting. I just don't know anything about it. I struggle with the stuff that they talk about. Like, if I got in touch with a time traveler, I think I would have a lot more interesting questions. And all he wants to talk about is what market do you shop at? What bridge do you cross at? To me, these people are like super boring because they're just trying to verify everything. They're at the library right now. They're looking for this guy Aldersay because it's somebody that Lucas mentioned. Because he mentions all his little friends in passing, right? So they are looking up the name. Debbie still refused to be discouraged. She couldn't find Aldersay despite his being a skilled man and presumably therefore an important citizen. But there were a number of Aldersays to follow up. I was still looking out of the window at the people wrapped up against the cold. I wanted to go home to read about something else. Deb said there has to be a way of proving this, doesn't there? We could wait up to catch the intruder. We could do lots of things. Let's go home. See, Ken's just like boring to me. He's just like kind of dull. Okay, so they're walking back home and Ken starts thinking more about John, the guitar player. He could break in quite easily. He wanted to upset me so that he could appear smooth and clear-headed to impress Deb out of my life and into his. He tried to dismiss such thoughts as nonsense. I mean, I guess if this were happening, I'm sure like they'd all be questioning and like a little bit paranoid. Like, who could be doing this to us? Because it's not just like a little... Like, if you were going to do this to a person, that's not a small prank. That's like a major investment. Like, you would need to have a whole plan. It's just too well thought out and honestly just too kind of boring. Like, I feel like if they were trying to fuck with them, they would have done malevolent stuff. But they really just, all they do is like they stack, they like it's a person. All the poltergeist activity is like stacking of shit. It'd be funny if I looked like that. Just tuck my face into my neck. Can you imagine that? My foot was falling asleep in that position. This is gonna make me laugh every time I read it. I'm never gonna read his last name. I'm too immature to read his last name. Okay, just gonna call him John. So John brought in a book on poltergeists to research. I could imagine back then that there would be a big lack of resources when it comes to this kind of information. Poltergeists, according to the research, could remain for months, could develop destructive tendencies. Some could even bite, which is rare. Their usual activities, like I said, stacking objects, rapping noises, etc., are extremely well documented. They just do goofy shit. They're like, I mean, I don't know, it's hard to say what they are. So yeah, actually that's what he says here. It's hard to say what they are. An adjunct of our own personalities, unconscious activity on our part, elemental or primitive bundles of some kind, entities feeding upon the anxieties and emotional stresses of recent months in such a way as to preserve and reinforce these emotional states. Much poltergeist activity is fraudulent, an adolescent's prank, or perhaps due to someone slightly older looking for attention or developing an active fantasy world. A little knowledge is often said to be a dangerous thing. Debbie was 19. Had I been paying her enough attention? Before reading Poltergeist, I had felt confident that she was uninvolved. Now I was less so. But it was only a popular book. Perhaps I needed to look into the subject more deeply. Make fewer excuses. Had I been paying her enough attention? Like, really? You're gonna doubt your own girlfriend? Person that's like so all about like researching this with you. And also I just don't like how he talks about A little knowledge is said to be a dangerous thing. Does that mean like he thinks of her as like young and naive, like she doesn't know better? Because that's kind of dick. Not to focus on that, but I mean, just grab my attention. John and Debbie pursued their ideas. The latest was ley lines, the old straight paths, the lines of force, supposedly crossing England and elsewhere, of course, which could be identified by lining up sites of antiquity. It was not a subject I should normally choose to discuss in company, but since we had drifted as far as the biting poltergeist and automatic writing, an excursion into ley lines seemed quite moderate and reasonable. On large-scale maps spread across the floor of the living room, Dodleston was easily accommodated by 2 ley lines, and John had once read of an association between ley lines and the frequency of parapsychological events, especially poltergeists. Our thinking led us to draw up this model. We had a rare type of poltergeist, sophisticated entity, adept at word processing. Try again. We were experiencing activity commonly attributable to poltergeists, about which, descriptively at least, quite a lot is known. The classes of activity commonly associated with this phenomenon were present: movement of objects, stacking of objects, noises, and so forth. In addition, the cottage may, or may not, be close to a ley line, which supposedly increases the chance of this sort of occurrence. But we had no theory to offer about the genesis of the messages. This appeared to be unique. A friend of John's, Rod Emberton, a gangling intellectual but talented architect, was the arch skeptic. It's obviously a hoax. You're all being made fools of. Anyway, I can prove it. There's never been a bridge at Aldford over Dee. If there was a bridge, a town would have grown up around it. As an argument, it sounded quite reasonable. Why mess around with pseudoscience when a little analysis, a little thought could bring you the answer? We considered the messages as a group. The first message, the poem, didn't fit anywhere and was clearly unrelated, not only to the language, but to the whole tenor of the latter material. I don't agree with that. That poem wasn't specific or non-specific to that time period. I mean, yeah, it would have been maybe odd to see. Would it have been? I don't know. I think people have been writing all kinds of different ways since the beginning of time. I don't think that's that weird. They're saying that because they're so different, though, could have been a different writer. Like, what does it mean? The later communications seemed to all be by one author, Lucas. But the modern punctuation cast a great deal of doubt on the authenticity. And the names that he dropped were untraceable. And they're really caught up on this for some reason. I don't know why they think people can't just exist and not be able to look up like centuries later, but they're still trying to just like validate all of this. And like, to be honest, it's just super obnoxious. It's like we're 5 chapters in and you guys are just, you're not even like, wow, man, this might be real. You just think it's a hoax. It seems like this John guy is like more into that ghosty stuff like Debbie is into. And he seems to be threatened by this. Yeah, this guy's whole demeanor is just so boring to me. He's like, could it be true? No. Could it be true? No. Like, that's his brain. I'm like, dude, just fucking grow up, man up, deal with it. You have poltergeist activity. Let's be adults about it. The poltergeist activity continued. In chapter 6, at the cottage, objects moved, sometimes in our presence, while our backs were turned. Debbie and I were quite edgy, but we attempted to diffuse our anxiety. The school in those early days acted as a kind of sounding board and moderator. He's like reading a book about ley lines in one of his classes, and he's like, this class is pretty smart. So he kind of teaches them how to find ley lines, and they were like really interested. So that becomes like a cute little class project. Okay, so like a ley line is from one point to another, but there's these antiquities right around the world. So the point is like you could just extend the line until you found something you wanted to include. Put the maps away and return to the safety of the syllabus. That's how he writes the whole, like, he's just kind of like, it's like, grow up, dude, deal with it. So the school knew about the poltergeist. Like, he had friends, you know, that he would confide in, and he ran stuff by people, and like he also thought that it was a hoax, so like he talked about it because he wanted to catch who it was. I drove home at the very earliest opportunity. I parked the wrong way against the pavement. Inside the cottage, it was calm and quiet. The newspaper was in several parts. This is just a normal day with their house. They just find stuff like this. A mug, a woolen scarf, and a tie were piled against the base of the kitchen door. The old brass pan had come off its hook on the purlin above the fireplace. From the windowsill had come the file containing the messages and the floppy disk, only the disk was not in the folder. Outside its paper cover it lay neatly face up on the kitchen table. It read Lucas W. That was what I had written on it, but it said to my awakening mind quite clearly, Lucas W. wants to communicate. He wants the computer back. If it doesn't come, there could be a disturbance. Ah, okay, so that's why they're looking out for poltergeist activity, because this is like during the week. During the week, they don't have the computer usually, because he brings it home on weekends. The power of cymbals. Before me, there was such a disturbance. It seemed that from behind the kitchen, a force strong enough to drag the plastic file 18 feet to the door had caught other insecure objects in its field. I imagined the lightness of its touch, but also its potential for violence, its determination. The cottage was calm and quiet. I fed the cats out in the yard, collected the mail, and left. I put nothing back, but slipped the disc into its paper cover for safety. So now we're up to chapter 7. I was looking at Dodleston on Google Earth, and I'm gonna play that, explain where stuff is, and then I'm just gonna keep playing it while I read. I studied the first couple pages, and he gives pretty good directions, and I found the cottage that he's staying at called Meadow College. He said it's between the chapel stores and the phone box facing Kinnerton, and there's also an exit off of Church Road. So it is right here. So let's see what it looks like. It's just how I pictured it. Right? Let's see, maybe we can turn this. No. Wow. Well, this is, let's see, this is the elementary school. They are right backed up to the elementary school. So this would make, that would make it there. So they start to become a little bit scared at all of the activity. Still, they borrowed a computer at the weekend and they left a message for him. They don't show the message. They say it was a bit raggy because we were not sure what was going on, what we should say. We were trying to make it sound reasonable, even if someone owned up to a hoax. And Lucas replied, "My most noble friend, have I not been friendly towards you? And yet, unless I am mistaken, I think there is not enough trust. Despite this, I have been open with you. I know not whence you came, nor whither you will go, nor do I have an answer for why you are in my house. But you are a goodly visitor, and you may stay as long as you like." We were in the house. Later in the same message, "My pleasant fool, my servant, thinks that you are all in my head. He says I act like a seer, but I know you live now. He also says that my blood is poisoned and that it is my weak, hinged imagination. But I am not mad, I think, and told him so. I also said it is like fairy gold, that he should keep it secret until I write a book." The last part of his message gave an answer to why he was here if he was born in Somerset. "I came to settle here because of the excellent pasture for which at one time I had to pay no tax, unlike my relations. Now things have changed, for the unfavorable King Sheriff does not plague me, so it seems he is here every hour. I have had some mishaps with your hidden device, which does not place my words, but it is no more undone. I think it is too agreeable for me at times, but it does amuse." The final section went like this. "I fish for herrings and salmon in the Dee and sometimes in Fluker's Brook. Tell the friend John with whom you spoke that I know much about fishing. I think you are jesting when you talk about the horseless cart tiger. It is good that we can be carefree and joke like this. Lucas. He's talking about the guy's car. So the whole time these messages are going on, Peter is standing by with his Oxford English Dictionary to make sure that everything is legit. Not only is, because there's an odd word here and there that he would look up, not only was it used in the right way, but it was evocative of the time period. But the messages were infected with odd grammatical constructions associated only with certain regions. So this is kind of like different dialects today, is how I see it. He replies to Lucas the same day with a few comments on cars and an invitation to talk about fishing and his time at college. He snipped out a photograph of a Jaguar X Coupe, because Jaguar, tiger, it's a car, not a tiger. So it wasn't the same color as his, but he thought it would do. So Lucas wigs out. He's like, my good friend, I have found your picture of the cart, but it is a crude thing, for without horse it won't go far. Tell me what unknown wood is this? It is like silk. I cannot describe it better. Now, first they think, what is he talking about? Silk. The car? What is the car made out of? And then they realize that he's talking about the photograph, because he's never seen a paper like this before. For some reason, too, the photograph was charred at the edges, showing signs of heat throughout. It was very brittle, almost crumbled in his hands when he picked it up. Pretty weird. Lucas includes some other information, which he was asked for. The name of his college, which is apparently Jesus College, Oxford. He drops some names, the schoolmaster, some books. The King's Sheriff is Tom Falshurst. His favorite meal. Just general conversation. So, of course, the next day, when they're trying to verify everything, they find out that Jesus College is Elizabethan, founded in 1571. It's too late for him to have gone there. So they're always just trying to find these little idiosyncrasies, but they don't confront him with it, right? At this point, they really think that he's a hoax. They do some normal stuff. They go to an Elvis Costello concert. Deb goes to the library. She wants to do more research on Jesus College. So they get the next communication. My friend, again, I must say I have no wish to cause you discomfort. I am not easy myself when I have communication with you, but 'tis so that we both are friendly and have intelligence enough to recognize that fools or drunks we are not. And 'tis, if not for yours, my material for my book, I think. You know now of Bieleful, feel of good, goodly, unless I mistake. My cook says I shall repent my adventure, and that it will come to a foul end, but I think she is jealous, and told her so. She does not like another woman in my home, and not one as fair as your maid, I fancy. The red book is strange. What material is it? And the key is strange also. Whose handwriting is in the book, pray? You have many books, but I fear they are too badly written. Tell me where the writing device came from and how it makes the lights. I have so many questions. Tell me about your world, Lucas. That's a confusing message, isn't it? It sounds like the first time he's writing almost. The red book he talks about is just a plastic folder where he keeps all the printouts of everything and the disc. So he writes back attempting to explain that it's not a box of lights from the devil and that it's electricity, and he attempts to explain what that is. And he gets a response the next day. My friend, pray, what strange demon are you? I am so confused. You are goodly, I feel, but your lies frighten me much. You said you are alive, but this is not so. I have no wish to accuse you, but you said also that you are an educated man, and that you know of my friend Erasmus, but you do not mention my misspelt words. If you were alive, you would say you know not of Jesus College. You also spoke of a power of which I have no knowledge. Where does this power come from, and what did you study in your place of learning? Where is it? Because if you do not explain this to me, then I must make an end to my words with you. This would cause me much despair. It is not that I make you afraid. It is you that makes me afraid. Lucas. This is where they figure out, oh, we've been so stupid. We've been testing him this whole time, not even thinking that he could have been testing us. Well, welcome to life. He apologizes for not noticing his errors and spelled them out for him. So he replies back the next day. My good friend, will you dispel my doubts? In the last message, I was somewhat confused. Your friend from Oxford does much writing in the Red Book. Pray, what does he say? It is unknown to me, but he uses some of my words. Does he come from my time? 'Tis true about my life. It was just a joke. My Latin is not so bad as that, and I know much about my most worthy Desiderius Erasmus's books. He was a most knowledgeable man for whom I had much love, and he spoke much wisdom on the frivolous and misgoverned ways of the Christian doctrine. I think he has opened many eyes to the so-called learned men when he was given his appointment in Greek. I began my time at Brasenose College, Oxford, not Jesus College. As I said in all manner of things, his best must be colloquia, than which I know no better. My cook, Catherine, asks, what is your most tasty meal and how you make it? My shoes are made of swine skin and sheep's coat. I have 8 pigs and 16 fowl. I tan the pig skin, cut the skin, then shape and sew it together and put the sheep's coat and herbs into them to keep my feet healthy. I must go out. Time is moving on. And then a Latin phrase. Quid agis nocere de meus agia haber ja reciter, hic meus Latinus is non utilis. Farewell, Lucas. Peter tried to make sense of the Latin phrase himself, but eventually gave it to the only teacher in school competent in the language, and she considered it rather careless dog Latin. So yeah, I don't know what that says. I don't know, maybe they'll come up with it later. So they realize they can't just let the chats come in all willy-nilly. They have to disqualify themselves. They have some people volunteer to sit with Debbie so that she's not alone. They do stuff like that. And then eventually they invite in the Society for Psychical Research. They were recommended to contact them for advice. And so from then on, they were not alone, and the communications were heavily watched. The last thing, they'd have to try to improve the security at the cottage. They were still planning on knocking down bits of it about, and consequently didn't hold out much hope, but promised to try. I don't know if they got the security bit down, if they were still in the middle of renovating. So as of now, we're up to chapter 9, and I think this is a good place to stop.